Survival horror, a term popularized back in 1996 with the release of a little title called Resident Evil. It is a genre notorious for frantic item management, the odds constantly being against you, and a plethora of grotesque and horrifying enemy designs from mutated scientists to figments of the character's psyche to whatever the hell this is supposed to be.
Holy Jesus. What is that? What the fuck is that?
Conscript is very different in this sense. The enemies are very real and cemented in one of the most disturbing periods of human history, the First World War. The First World War is, in my opinion, one of the most underutilized periods in gaming. Most studios tend to play it safe and stick to the old faithful World War II, with the over-the-top depictions of British and American heroes battling the big baddies in Hollywood-style scenarios. They flooded the market for a long time. The one depiction of World War I we did get was, albeit an incredible game, not exactly the most realistic thing I'd ever seen, unless of course it is entirely possible to blow up a tank with a sword whilst riding on horseback.
It might happen. Yeah, and monkeys might fly out of my butt.
Conscript takes a much more grounded approach, throwing us slap bang into the middle of France during one of the most notorious battles of the war, the Battle of Verdun. This would go down in history as the longest battle of the war, lasting over 9 months and had a body count of approximately 300,000, making it one of the most brutal battles ever recorded. The year is 1916. Germany believes the war can be won within France. Now, Britain was the strongest opposition they faced. However, this was largely down to Britain's allies, in particular France at the time, who were a very prominent threat. Verdun City was a strong fortress for the French. However, due to its placement, it was a very vulnerable target. This, combined with the fact it was a very sentimental city for the French, meaning the soldiers would rally to defend it, made it the perfect drop zone for Germany to unleash hell over. The battle began with a barrage of shells and artillery the likes of which had never been seen, and this is the hellscape that we begin our journey in. The game plays like a throwback to the golden age of survival horror, diverse environments to explore with many secrets and side content to discover, very limited item inventory, a classic limited save system that Resident Evil popularized, and more that we'll get into detail about later. Now, despite all the Resident Evil reference I've already mentioned, we are not playing as a super cop like Jill Valentine or the Sigma Chad himself, Leon S. Kennedy. Hell, we're not even playing as a badass trucker like Travis from Silent Hill Origins.
Kick his ass, Seabass!
We're playing as Andre, a young French soldier looking for his captured brother, Pierre. We're playing as a kid. A poor kid who's been whisked away to fight for his country with zero experience of anything other than living the simple life back home in the country, which the game wonderfully transitions to with somber flashbacks in between the chapters. So super early on in the game, we are summoned to the front line to defend against the German attack, and this is where you realise this game is not pulling any punches. Now, being something of a survival horror pro myself, I decided to go big balls and try veteran mode right off the get-go, quickly learning the error of my ways and running back to normal mode with my tail between my legs. So this part throws you deep into the combat and gets you involved with a lot of mechanic. Melee weapons are fairly diverse in this game and all have different stats and all are entirely breakable as well. You also are given a cool roll to dodge attacks if timed properly. Unfortunately, you have a stamina bar in this game, and I feel like Andre went to the same cardio class as Sebastian Castellanos, because that thing goes down hella fast. The gunplay is something I really love about this game. Being World War I, our primary gun is a bolt-action rifle. Being only able to shoot one bullet at a time, and then sit and watch the painfully long reload animations really adds to the tension. There were so many instances where I was seconds away from getting clapped by an enemy before my reload finished just in the nick of time and I blew his ass away. The aiming system also takes a while to get used to, with a lot of the reticles shaking as you aim. It all just adds to the feeling of being a brand new soldier with no idea what you're doing. every firefight is intense, and these siege sections really make you feel out of your element. Luckily, as you progress, you will expand your arsenal of weapons. However, going all guns blazing isn't always the best option, as the game does feature stealth elements too. There are a bunch of hiding spots throughout the game, and turns out it is possible to beat the game without much combat. Sometimes stealth may actually be the better option, because when enemies hit, they hit hard. And managing to sneak up on people will actually allow you to hit them with a melee attack, which, for most enemies, ends up in a one-hit KO. There's also several ways you can use the environment to your advantage. In some cases this will be essential. Turret guns can be a lifesaver to mow a few people down for a quick breather. The good old faithful red barrels are here too to make your own barbecued kraut if you really need to. The use of stealth and environmental hazards is a lifesaver, because most of the time I was saving my firepower for the defense stages where you have no choice but to fight. Or not, but we can go into that a little bit later. As I mentioned earlier, this game doesn't bring out the outlandish enemy design that other games of this ilk may do. Instead, the enemy bracket here is relatively small, but not slim enough for the combat to ever get boring. We have different flavours of German soldier here to face, from the trench club wielding melee enemies that gave me a lovely little jump scare through this door, to the tanks covered in full body armour that rush you down, to these cape wielding snipers that I absolutely despise. Every enemy can be dealt with in different ways and makes combat scenarios a bit of a puzzle, especially when you get to rooms with a diverse cast of enemy types in. Now, speaking of the enemies in this game, there's some very human touches given to the opposing soldiers. The first time I killed a soldier and saw a dropped item only to pick it up and see a blood-stained photograph of their family, I was shocked. It makes you realise none of these guys hate you. They don't really want to be there either. They will force just like you. Fight or die. That's their only options. As you progress, you will encounter soldiers that aren't even hostile. They'll be stood, grabbing their head maybe, losing their mind, slowly descending into the madness, going crazy due to hunger, the shell shock's got onto them, or constantly seeing their allies getting killed. I've just sent them over the edge. There's only so much the human brain can take. This amount of psychological terror is seriously effective, and whenever I go past these soldiers, I'm so conflicted. There's nothing you can do to help them, but do you just leave them or put them out of their misery? Sometimes enemies will drop after being shot, but will still be alive, rolling around in agony. I kinda saw this as you being such a novice that you don't really know where to line up your shots to kill somebody clean enough. We've literally never held a gun before in our entire life, so the choice is then up to you, whether you finish them off or leave them to suffer. As the bodies pile up, you start to realise when you're coming to and from areas that the corpses are still there. I wonder if there's a reason. You'll also come across holes in the trenches that may be rat infested that you can throw grenades into. That's interesting. See, there's another problem here that we have to face other than other humans. We have a big, flesh-eating rat problem on our hands. As you progress, all the corpses will become covered in giant rats, and if they spot you, they will chase you down and attack. These things are particularly annoying because on the off chance their bite poisons you, it will cripple your entire total health bar. These rats add another cool mechanic to the game where you can burn the dead bodies. We can do this by crafting molotovs or spilling fuel on the floor and shooting it with a bullet. Now this really reminds me of the Crimson Heads in Resident Evil Remake. So in that game, if you don't burn the zombie bodies, they will come back faster and more aggressive than ever. It really makes you think about whether killing enemies is worth it or not, as you may be making your playthrough even more perilous than it already is. Having to juggle items such as fuel and molotovs in your already limited inventory could add even more stress to the gameplay. But then having to avoid a bunch of enemies in every single room you walk into doesn't exactly sound like a walk in the park either. The best survival horror games always make you feel like you're at odds with the world. Now, of course, this wouldn't be a true survival horror game without a soothing safe room with some absolutely slamming music, and Conscript does not disappoint. And oh, look who it is, we even have our own gas mask wearing homie of a merchant. This charming dude is our guardian angel and acts just like the main man from Resident Evil 4.
Got a lot of good things on sale, stranger.
What do you got?
He will sell us a plethora of useful tools to craft healing items, ammo, bigger item bags, etc, etc. Gunpowders can be mixed together or with chem fluid to create different bullets, and combining bandages with chem fluid can create stronger heals that also deal with the rat poison. Now, this merchant deals with cigarettes as a currency, as one of the few things that can provide a bit of sweet temporary release from the horrors of war. It makes a lot of sense that they would be becoming something valuable enough to trade for all this stuff. So that was a nice little touch that I liked.
Alright, this cigarette piece is fucking shit. And by the way, who chose this photo, alright? I have a double chin, alright? Nobody notices that crap?
The merchant will also upgrade our weapons thanks to gun parts that we collect on our journey, and we can trade in any treasures and gemstones we find on our travels, some of which can be combined to increase their value. Honestly, the addition of this guy made me so happy, especially because Resident Evil 4 is, like most people, my all-time favourite game ever. Every game needs a merchant. This room is also where we save the game with ink pellets, another nod to Resident Evil and its ink ribbons. Conscript takes us on a journey to many different locations on our mission, from rusty bloodstained trenches to the cremated war-torn forests. All the major areas here play just like the classics, with a map system similar to Silent Hill, where the map will scribble updates on as you find points of interest. You'll encounter obstacles that need specific items to get past, or fancy looking doors that require ridiculously specific keys to open. Another nice Resident Evil reference there to add to the tally. Some rooms we encounter will be full of mustard gas due to the ongoing battles, and only accessible with a gas mask that we get a little later on. I love how wearing the gas mask increases your stamina usage and slightly reduces visibility. Such a cool little feature to add to the realism. This is the classic backtracking horror gameplay that I fell in love with. Whenever you pick up a special item, I'm like, well, I need this soon. Should I fill up a slot with it yet or put it in the box? Most areas contain basements and tunnels that have very limited lighting. Luckily we have a torch item, which also requires spare batteries. But the amount of time I've been caught with a full inventory in these zones and no item box nearby, man, it's anxiety inducing, but in the best way. Levels are laid out really well. Safe rooms aren't super common, but they're also not sparse enough where it feels too cruel. I love the thrill of running back to one with hardly any health, and about 45 minutes of progress to potentially lose, especially because some of those runbacks can be savage. If you thought some of the runs in Dark Souls 1 to the bosses were brutal, these are kind of up there, especially if you got a rat problem. There was a moment where I was casually going about my business, and a Chris Redfield sized boulder appears and almost destroyed my progress. Or in another instance, I picked up a heavy shell and suddenly couldn't run fast or take it out of my inventory as a gang of enemies tried to mob me. Very intense moment that kinda reminded me of picking up the fuel capsule in RE Remake. The puzzles in this game are also pretty fun. A lot of the clues you'll have to figure out yourself by reading journal entries that you pick up along the way. Speaking of these journal entries, there's some really great reads here, especially a massive 40-page long diary you find from a German soldier who talks you through all the hardships they've endured whilst being away from home. It's an excellent read, and I recommend reading the whole thing when you get to play this game. The game uses a lovely palette of mud and grey, with the constant dread of the German army breathing down your neck. You really feel like, as you go from one area to the next, the prior one has been overrun by the enemy. This is very apparent when you return to the support trench area in a later chapter. I remember desperately running to a room I knew as a safe room, only for me to run in and notice it had been trashed, item box destroyed, merchant had fled, and there was a tank waiting in the corner to ambush me. Very effective and memorable moment I'll never forget. You'll encounter squad members and other NPC characters as you progress, including this super chill dude who always has to bum a cigarette off you. There's also a medic who asks for equipment in exchange for increasing your health and stamina bars, and a sobering moment where a German soldier you have imprisoned asks if you can go find a photo of his family that he dropped when he was captured. There's a particularly great moment in chapter 4 where we've been instructed to recruit as many soldiers that we can find that have gone MIA, with a clear instruction of forcing them to join the fight or execute them right on the spot if they refuse. Most of the soldiers we find run away, some go feral and try and knife you to death. It just adds to the overall lack of hope. Even our own men are turning against us. As we get to the final zone, a monstrous German fortress known as Fort Vaux, we're really in it deep now. This place is relentless and throws everything you've already faced at you at once. I really went all out here with item and bullet usage. We then end up in another area called the Mantle. Now this is the last stand, there's no going back. Once you jump down that hole, James Sunderland style, you're in the end game now. We'll walk past the countless corpses of our friends and foes, and then, right there, we see him, the trademark red neckerchief. It's my brother Pierre. But before we rescue him, we need to take on an entire fucking army now. I equipped everything I had left, pushed forward, and eventually we got through it. This last zone is like a wave of enemy after enemy. It kind of reminds me of the finale of Evil Within 1, where they just keep spawning over and over. And eventually, we persevere. Yeah, we made it. Now, for the record, I have now beaten this game twice. Once last year when it released, and once again for this video. And both times, my story ended very, very differently. This game has many different endings. Right, so remember when I said I found the game brutally difficult at first? Well, when I first played the game, during that first major attack in chapter 1, I couldn't handle it. I found a hatch and I got the hell out of there. Something I'd forgotten that I did later on. I only remembered when it came to the end of the game, I had managed to save my brother, albeit with a severe leg injury, but I thought we were both going to make it. Then, I got confronted by my sergeant. Before you knew it, Pierre's in hospital, recovering well, and I'm lined up with the other traitors about to be executed for cowardice. What a suitably morbid way to end my first playthrough. I was adamant to redeem myself on my next one. Luckily when I replayed the game for this video, I did survive this time, but poor Pierre didn't quite make it, and before you knew it, I'm in Jacob's Ladder Nightmare Hospital, and a Nazi gorilla beats me around the head with a bat. What the fuck? This ending really shows that even those who survived will never recover from the mental toll caused by this war, and will probably suffer from these nightmares for their whole lives. Now I'm yet to get the best ending, but the game has so much replayability that I can't wait to go again. As well as the endings, there are a bunch of unlockable costumes to try out, and a huge range of guns to spice up every playthrough, some of which can only be found in certain puzzles and side quests. There's also a bunch of cool challenges to attempt, like going for the S+ rank, or a no-kill run, which I have no idea how you'd pull off, but I'm definitely up for trying. I'd also like to point out that this game has an incredible soundtrack. It haunts you, but also contains slight glimmers of hope. The music isn't super prominent through majority of the game, but it adds the right amount of seasoning to the appropriate moments that it plays. The moments with no music are perfect too. Sometimes the only sounds you hear will be our trunching footsteps through the mud as shells explode in the distance, or vague gunfire and yells in the background as you hear your breathing grows heavier as your stamina bar is dropping. In conclusion, Conscript is an absolute gem of a game, and it's probably my favourite game that released in 2024. So much care was very evidently put into it, from the gorgeous pre-rendered scenes that you're sometimes treated to the many colourful propaganda posters you'll see on your travels. This game is one that every fan of challenging older horror games absolutely needs to play, and I can't wait to see what Jordan Mockey decides to do next. A sequel based on another historical war would be absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for watching this video. I'm very new to all of this, so if you made it this far, I really appreciate it. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you enjoyed the content. Definitely more on the way. If you have any suggestions as to which games I could cover next, please drop them in the comments. Be it AAA, retro, or indie, we love all manner of horror here. So that's going to be it for today. Take care, and I will see you on the next one.